Thank you, everybody, for joining. We're welcome to this Profitable Regeneration webinar. We're pleased to have Josh Adams here with us. And as we always do, we like to kick this thing off with a prayer. We're just stewards of this, and God knows all the answers. We're honored to be part of this group. And so I've asked Abby Levy if she would give us a prayer. And so we'll do that, and then we'll introduce Josh.
Our kind Father in heaven, we are grateful for this gathering we can have together today. We're grateful for Mr. Adams and for the preparation that he has put into this webinar. And we pray that you will bless him and us with listening ears and a teaching heart. We're grateful for the Zoom and that we're able to do this. And we pray that as we ponder at how we can be better stewards and how we can grow our knowledge in that area of our lives, that we will make connections and be able to serve each other. We're grateful for these things, and we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Abby. We appreciate that. So yes, we do these webinars twice a month. This is being recorded. It's going to be repurposed as a podcast. And you can find the podcast video on YouTube if you look for the Profitable, whatever the name of that is, that we call that channel, the Profitable Regeneration Summit. But if you're, or video webinar series, if you're on this, you're on our email list and you'll get a link. So if you're listening to the podcast and you want to see the slides, look for us on YouTube. And grateful for those that are able to be here live. If you have questions, comments, William and I are kind of in the back room here. We'll interject those appropriately, but largely we're just going to kind of let Josh roll with this for 45 minutes or so. He could go for 45 days, but we're going to kind of rein him in here a little bit so that, you know, condense it down to 45 minutes. And then we'll do some question and answers at the end. And then we'll stop the recording. And for those who want maybe a little more one-on-one, we can do that for a few minutes after that also. So that's the flow of it. Let me introduce Josh Adams. Josh has been a friend of ours for nearly a decade. I got to know him at an executive link meeting, which is the follow-up group to the Ranching for Profit School. Both Josh and I are alumni of that school. And I was, immediately impressed. There's individuals who just have an attractive personality, and Josh was one of those. He's definitely the type of person that you want to get to know. Very charismatic, but I could tell that there was a true depth of knowledge. It was not superficial, and very, very confident, very bold in his actions. And so after that meeting, we stayed in touch and texted, and then on a summer day, I texted him and said, "Hey, I want to come visit your farm." And he said, "Well, hey, we're rained out, so come on up." And so I spent a day touring around his farm in Grace, Idaho. I've looked at a couple other properties that he's managed, and he's actually been a couple of times to our ranch in Nevada and offered us some great advice and counsel, which we've been able to implement. So really what we want to talk about here today, we talk a lot about regeneration, being regenerative, and haying in the regenerative circles has a bad rap because inherently it is degenerative. I think we've all seen hay fields that are just worn out, but when we looked at Josh's fields and we looked at his neighbor's fields, he was not integrating all of the soil health principles, meaning that he didn't even have livestock on his operation, but yet there was no bare ground. The leaf size on his alfalfa plants were easily 3 to 5 times bigger than those just across the fence line. There were more plants per square foot. There were more leaves on the plant stem. And all these things I would have been oblivious to if Josh hadn't pointed them out. And now that I'm more versed in it, it's like, okay, he's got some stuff figured out here. And we bought hay from him. It's good quality. So we know that what he does works. And that's really why I wanted to invite him on. It's a good message that we need. Ironically, one of the people that I invited to the class today says, "Yeah, you're going to have a webinar on profitable haying." And here I am stuck in my tractor, not able to watch the webinar because I'm haying, right? And I mean, that's just right. That's that is. So whenever you're listening to this, maybe some of you are in your tractors or whatever, that's fine. We're not saying that you know, that you need to get rid of the hay, that you need to sell all your equipment, but you'll know what the options are. And that's kind of what our goal is and what the costs are. And really coming at it from a soil health side. Like, how can we build soil and grow quality hay and be profitable for year after year? That's a tall order, Josh. Are you up to it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm all in here. So yeah,
Okay.
you guys, well, thank you for inviting me. I have kind of a strange story, and the only reason I feel like I've been invited here is because of that story. I don't come from a conventional agriculture background. Actually, my dad was a chiropractor, my mother was a speech therapist, and I'm very, very stubborn. And so at a young age, I decided I wanted to work on farms and ranches and just learn about it. And I got quite passionate about it, and I decided that was going to be my path someday. But I was the most annoying employee you've ever had in your life. I would always ask questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? And it just led me wanting more answers. And so as I grew and got out into the world, I found myself at about 24 years old, and I owned a little home service business, and it did well, but I was sick of it. And I thought, man, I want to go back and start farming. And so I just knocked on as many doors as I could. And as luck would have it, on a rodeo trip, I just, through circumstances that are strange, bumped into a gentleman who said he'd sell us his farm. At 25 years old, I jumped in with both feet with no previous farm ownership experience at all. Found a beat up old farm and just started. And so if you don't have dad or grandpa to rely on, which I didn't, you just have to learn from scratch. And so one of the biggest things that I did wrong in my career was to listen to my neighbors. Now, that has both positive and negative connotations, but I listened to my neighbors. I says, hey, how do you do this? How do you farm? And so I got all the conventional answers. You know, you have to farm in this manner. You got to plant these crops. You got to spray them in this way. And if you have issues, then you do this and that and this. And so I took their advice for the first little while and started going down that path. And Jared, did you have a slide there on your side right now?
Yeah, hopefully it's going to pull up here. If not, we can always make this slide deck available afterwards. But
okay, that sounds good. Well,
so as soon as it comes on, you can point to them.
Okay, very good. So there was a time at the very beginning where I couldn't feed myself, let alone my wife and my daughter, off of the farm. So I actually chose to rodeo. I rode bucking horses for 15 years. And so I'd do all my farm work, and then I'd leave and go rodeo on the weekends to win some money and make some money to pay the light bill. And so I noticed one afternoon that right before I left to go on a rodeo trip, that everything was fine, everything was irrigated, everything was green. And I left for 3 days and came back. And when I got back, one of my most prominent alfalfa fields went from green to brown. And I thought, well, that's strange. And I drove up and I looked, in my entire alfalfa field, I had about 8 inches of growth when I left. And when I returned, it was gone. And so what do? You ask the neighbors, hey man, I'm getting infested. I got bugs, I got problems. What do? I'm getting attacked. You know, I viewed myself as a victim. I says, how do I fix this? And so of course we called in the cavalry. We got the chemicals found that we needed to save us. We hired a spray plane. And so we went out the next morning, and I'll never forget this, you guys. I was standing out on my lawn, and I have a little 2-year-old daughter at this time. And this spray plane, okay, go to the next slide. That was the transformative moment right there. That was the exact plane. That was on the exact day. So I'm standing out in my front yard, and this plane boils over the power line and comes down and lets loose this spray. And it was a beautiful morning. It slowly drifted down on, and right before it got to the alfalfa hay, there was just the littlest, tiniest puff of wind that puffed that spray over, and I watched it as it settled on my lawn. And then it hit me, and it just completely offended my senses. It was awful. Like I wanted to get away from there. This was toxic stuff. And I thought, as this plane was buzzing back and forth quite extensively, like, okay, so it's killing bugs, but my little girl has to walk and play on that lawn today. I don't want her playing in this. That was an offensive hit, And so that was this moment right here in time was the beginning of my understanding in evolution. And so I actually went and I took a walk. So you can see in the background, there's some hills above the farm ground. And I took a walk up on those hills up there. And I got looking around, and I was able to get on my hands and knees, and I was able to dig in the ground. And I looked around, and I didn't see any weeds. And then I also paid attention to the leaves there up on the hill, and I didn't see any bug holes in the leaves. And I thought, hold on. I'm not putting any energy or time on that mountain, yet the mountain doesn't have any of the weeds that I constantly have. It doesn't have any of the insect pressure that I constantly have. And the ground down there in the valley that I put all this energy and time into is hard as the back of my head. And when I plow it, it actually fractures like set up concrete. And this ground up here on the hill that isn't managed that way, I can dig. I could have dug to my elbow if I wanted to. Why is that? And so, I had the luxury of not having to toe the line, and I didn't have a patriarch to direct the ways, saying to me, this is how we do things here. So I was basically a maverick. We do things here however I want, because that's the nature of the setup. And out of a necessity of survival, I had to increase my productivity and try to figure out how I could make things go on this farm, because my family needed it. It was a do or die, make or break. I had debt, I had kids. Like, this is a big deal. And so honestly, you guys, that's how it all started. And so I asked a very specific question from then on, and still do. Why? Why is it the way that it is? Why do weeds grow down here and not up there? Why is the soil so soft up there and not down in the bottom? Why do I get all my advice from salesmen who obviously have a profit motive? Like, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense to me. And so the education right there began. And so because I had 800 acres here, I was able to learn. I'd stay up very late at night, and I'd learn, and I'd study, and I'd pull information from every source that I could. And it was interesting. Of all the different information that I pulled from, nowhere was I able to ask a specific person, or go to a specific event, or look at a specific book or a university and say, here's the silver bullet. And so what I had to do is I honestly had to think, okay, now is the time that I don't have to follow a different rule book. I have to change my mindset. And so that was the hardest thing in the world. But I'll tell you what, necessity is a pretty good motivator. And so that's how I was able to do that. So I changed my mindset just on how I thought about things. And I asked why a whole lot. And I was able to really change the way that I thought. And so I just felt like I was on my own, though, after going to work and making these different changes on fertility and different changes on different types of crops, different ways to manage my soil, different ways to put inputs on, irrigation, harvest methods, the whole thing. Everything was an experiment the whole time. And what I realized is there wasn't any single silver bullet. I felt super alone because I didn't have a tribe, or I didn't have like some sage forage grower that had it all figured out. Everybody was searching, or everybody was yielding to the knowledge of the universities and or just all the organic side. And so I felt very, very alone. And so I just got busy. That's all I did. I just got busy. And I'll tell you what, after a good solid 10,000 hours of learning, testing, trying, failing, trying to understand the relationship between land, plants, and animals, my process of thinking started to click in to where I believe it started to mimic the gardener that grew and managed the hill ground above my farm. And that's when everything started changing. Now, I did that by looking for some basic common denominators and asking why. And so when I did that, it was interesting to me because I thought, you know what, there's tons of fertility out here in these wild spaces that are just managed by the elk herds. Why is that? How can we mimic that? Because there's pretty good productivity up there, but I believe that technology, we can leverage that technology to be able to increase production down here on the farm ground without relying on the elk herds. And so when I changed my thinking, I was able to increase our hay yields between 30 and 40% on every single acre we owned and leased on farms of 2,600 acres in southeast Idaho, different growing zones, different climates, on leased and owned farms. And I decreased my input costs from this picture right here by 15%. And we did that for 11 years without stopping. And Jared, he came and visited my farm when we were well along in this process. We hadn't finished, but we were well along. And if you would skip through to some of the alfalfa pictures and just show what some of these things potential can be, Jared, if you can. This is alfalfa that's never seen a chemical, never seen any chemical fertilizer. It's not sick for some reason, is it? It doesn't have any bug holes in it. If you notice, go to some other ones, and you can just go through all the forage slides, and as soon as those plants start feeling healthy, what they'll do is they'll send out bigger solar panels because they can afford it. And they can say, okay, our below ground infrastructure can handle, more growth. And so they'll be able to send out more solar panels because there's good things going down below. And so we started thinking, it was interesting. We started thinking, well, how big can these forage crops grow? Like, how big can they get? How much yield is possible? That's something that I had never even heard of before. The county average in that county is like 3.6 tons per acre per year. And we thought, well, that's just kind of an arbitrary number. Let's see what we can do. And so the year that this picture was taken right here, we cut 6.5 tons of alfalfa per acre off of our farm ground in Grace, Idaho. And Grace, Idaho is like an ice box. And so we thought, okay, well, I believe that we need to push things and allow things to fill the measure of their creation somehow. And so we would do that, and we would experiment with slides like this, where we would have multi-species. We'd have all sorts of different seeds in one bundle. We'd have turnips and radishes down below, breaking up hardpan and creating root density and root mass. And then we'd have nitrogen fixers and a myriad of grasses here. This crop cost me almost nothing other than the seed to put in. And this was a 4.5 ton crop right here. And it was amazing what we were able to see. But one interesting thing that we found out is that not only was our crop yield bigger, but our water needs went down Our frost days were less consequential to us. There were several times when we would go down and we would see our crops, and we'd have a big ice event, and the neighbors would all be laid down, and ours would be tipped over with ice. But by 10 o'clock in the morning, they were standing, and the neighbors were still laying on the ground. And we thought, well, why is that? Asking why is the question. And my answer is, well, the soil was warm. Why was it warm? I believe that it was warm because the microbiological activity below the soil surface lent itself to massive stimulation and massive growth. So everyone, if you think about ways that nutrients get into a plant, like the physical way that nutrients physically get into a plant, well, there's not very many ways that they can. One way that they can is by mineral solubilization. Big word, just meaning that the nutrients and minerals need to be solubilized to be able to enter the pore spaces of the plant root to be able to provide it with nutrition. You can't take a bite bigger than your mouth, right? And so that's basically one way. And so that's how come commercial fertilizer operations that have a ton of commercial fertilizer. I'm thinking of a potato field right now in my mind. They throw a bunch of commercial fertilizer on a potato crop, and then they have to irrigate the heck out of it. They water it and water it and water it and water it because they need to solubilize those nutrients, those macro nutrients, to be able to push those into the roots. Well, there's also another way. So there's our friend the microbe, and what a microbe's job is to do is there's many jobs that microbes do. So, but one job they have is to solubilize minerals in the same way and to translocate those minerals and nutrients to the plant roots. And as many of you on this webinar probably understand, there's a symbiosis there between the plant roots and the microbes, where the plant roots will kick out a little sugar exudate, it's called, and the microbes will consume that in exchange for whatever mineral or nutrient that the plant is needing at the time. Beautiful symbiotic experience. But what microbes also do, because there's more than just one brand, there's a lot of different species, there's a lot of different brands of microbes that do a lot of different things underground. And so what they also do is they align soil profiles. They help align soil profiles, and they break apart chemical and electrical bonds in the ground. And so what that means is all we have to do is make sure that the mighty microbe population continues to populate, grow, and thrive. And guess what happens to all that commercial fertilizer that's been dumped on that field for years and years and years, many of it with salt contents, 40% and higher, that have electrically and chemically just tied up in the ground. So it's very, very hard to solubilize and go into a plant root. Well, guess what these microbes do? Well, they can chew apart those little bonds to be able to solubilize the parts of the minerals that the plant needs and break apart some of that commercial fertilizer and feed the plant with it. Well, it's like a smorgasbord. And so you can actually look at a played out farm. You can say, oh, you know what? This farm's played out. And it is just one little kiss away from being an absolute cornucopia of growth, because you've laid a lot of basic material in the ground that is inaccessible, and it's expensive, right? So you got all this expensive material, nutrients in the ground with salt and garbage and everything tied in with it. And all you need to do, literally, you guys, and this is the crazy part, it's not a ingredient list or a recipe. What it is, it's a way of thinking. How can we boost the microbial population and then leave it to them? That's pretty much the mindset, because what they'll do is, it's my firm belief that nature chases health. Nature chases health. And so it's my firm belief, if the conditions are right, that that microbial population can thrive, what they'll do is they'll immediately start chasing health. And what does health mean? Health means that your soil profile in your ground produces nutrient density for the consumer above ground. Now I can give you a couple of examples to that. I have a little video in my slideshow here that I'll show you a little bit later that shows a whole bunch of thistles. And people, what do you do when you see thistles? We'll get to that later. I'll just kind of go through these as you go here, Jared. Sorry, you guys, I'm not in control of my slideshow here, but the idea is that nature chases health all the time. And so when we see weeds, when we see bugs, we're not seeing an infestation because we're not victims. I don't believe in being a victim in any circumstance. So what that means is nature's chasing health somehow. So how do I figure out how to fix it? Well, what's the weed trying to do is the question that I ask. What's it trying to do? So if it's true, if nature truly is chasing health, and some people probably will disagree with that statement, but I'll prove you wrong, and I'll tell you how. If let's just pretend like all humans were removed from all the farm and ranch ground for 150 years. When we got placed back down on that farm and ranch ground in 150 years, would we go back to that farm and ranch ground and have it be completely just desertified and terrible and like a parking lot? No, we wouldn't. We would find just like that hill ground above my farm, we'd find deep, healthy soil. We'd find a multitude of different forages and grasses and plants and trees. And we'd find, very functioning animal populations. Nature always chases health. Sometimes we have bad days like this guy. And so go ahead and slide past it. That has context, but not in this situation. Right now, go to the very last slide. The very last slide is the one that I have that shows the thistles. That's kind of the best of my rec tapes there. But right here. So I wonder, would that play? Do you think, Jared? It'll play, but no audio. Okay, so what I'm saying is, do you see all those thistle skeletons? So that was nothing but thistles the year before. You couldn't even walk through this patch of thistles. And I just thought, okay, nature's trying to do something. Let me see what it can do. And so we actually threw cattle on it for about 10 days, 15 days, and then pulled them off. And that's all we did. And the next year we came back and there was an absolute treasure trove of grass. And so people think, you know what, if you have thistles, you got to spray the thistles. If you don't spray the thistles, the thistle seeds will come and they'll infect your whole area. They'll infect your whole farm. You got to spray those thistles. And so I disagree with that. It's my firm belief that spraying thistles grows more thistles, because the thistles are there for a job. They came, they did their job, and they helped bring calcium to the surface of the ground. They deposited that calcium on the surface. They broke up the ground a little bit. They improved the soil, and nature chases health. And so what I'm saying right here is, if you say that you need to spray thistles to be able to get rid of thistles, that's wrong. You need to let them do their job and move along their way. And that's really hard to believe sometimes, but I'm telling you, after experiencing this multiple dozens of times, it's true. If you let nature do its job and get through to the other side, you will find health. Now, here's the tough thing. The tough thing about this whole thing, because this is a regenerative summit, and I believe that a lot of people that come here are anti-chemical or anti-commercial fertilizer, whatever. But here's the tough thing. Commercial fertilizer works. Herbicides work. Pesticides work, right? Immediate gratification. It's every person's dream. As human beings, we love immediate gratification. And so what we need to understand is that in the same way, let me ask you, if you want your kids to be healthy, how many people would raise their hand? Probably most of us, right? Okay. Well, we want our kids to be active and be healthy and energetic. Here's an idea. Let's start a new program. Let's feed our kids energy drinks and caffeine first thing in the morning. And then right about noon, as soon as they start to lag, let's get them a snort of cocaine and methamphetamines. Let's do that. you know what you'd find out? You'd find an incredible burst of energy, wouldn't you? You'd see those kids bouncing off the walls. They'd really have immediate action. In the same way, if you provide some of these chemical and these synthetic inputs to your cropland, boom, you'll see immediate results. But what do they say? What do they say when you take any kind of drug? There's always a side effect, right? And so that's something that I don't subscribe to at all. I think, okay, the ends don't justify the means. And so there's a very big what if there. So I would submit and suggest to you guys that there's ways that we can actually boost microbial populations in the soil. It's kind of like eating a healthy, balanced meal, healthy, balanced diet. You don't get the same pop as you do from doing methamphetamines or drinking caffeine, but you have general overall health, vitality, and longevity. That's exactly the same thing that'll happen to your farms. And so what I do is I go to people's places and I don't give them a prescription, and I don't say you need 85 units of 1152 or 1034, all these other different kinds of commercial fertilizers. What I do is I look at people's soil and I say, how can we get microbial populations, for one, there? Number two, how can we help those microbial populations have somewhere to live? Number three, how can we make sure that those microbial populations have something to eat? And how can we not kill those microbial populations? That's the ticket. Because it's so easy to do one thing and then not the other, and then have a huge lag and a big problem, and organic and sustainable doesn't work, and it's all a bunch of BS. But that has the same bearing, in my opinion, you guys, as raising a little child up, just as healthy as can be and doing everything right. And when they're 7 years old, you let them put cellophane over their face for 4 days, and then you wonder why they're not healthy. It's the same exact thing. We gotta pay attention, because everything needs something to eat, something to breathe, a place to live, and food to eat, right? And you can't just stop that. Now with microbes, it's different, because they populate so quickly. They love their job. They do their job for free. All you got to do is make sure that they're there and they're going. But so often I see guys say, you know what, we're seeing great results. Our microbe populations were popping. Our crops were really coming. And then all of a sudden there was a big flat line when we decided to go spray Roundup to kill the thistle or whatever. And my heart just sinks, because these little microbes, man, you're destroying them with this chemical input, right? And then you're basically putting cellophane over their mouth and saying, work hard. They can't. You've eliminated, and so you got to start all over again. And so if you just simply have it in your mind, boost those microbial populations, and then don't kill them. Just keep on boosting them, give them every opportunity to grow and thrive. So honestly, you guys, the seed that you put in the ground is helpful, but it's a lot less important than the microbial population that's living down beneath the surface. And what's weird? Here's what's weird. Here's a weird thing. It's honestly as simple as that. And it's just the way that the gardener on the hill does it. That's exactly how he does it. And so that's how I mimic what I see there. So anyway, if there's any questions, I'll take them right now. But
that's great, Josh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think William's got a question, and that's just perfect. I appreciate your come from story, and that adds a lot of validity that you were able to figure it out. And a lot of times we look at somebody and we think, man, they're just successful. It's an overnight success that took the 10,000 or 20,000 hours to get there. And so I kind of got the blessing of meeting you somewhere in the middle. But in my book, I mean, you were years ahead of where I was when it came to growing nutrient dense forage. And so I was able to glean a lot from you. But what would you say to somebody I'll ask this question, then William can ask his. What would you say to somebody who is just in that process of they're on that chemical treadmill, they're heavy into that addictive behavior? What would be the steps so they don't just go cold turkey and sometimes have a loss in production to be able to transition to the biological system from the heavy full-on chemical system?
Okay. So there's a few different things to take into account there. So it depends on if they're growing perennials or annuals. So, and it depends on if they're growing grasses or legumes. So on very heavy nitrogen needing crops, grasses, then you get all your nitrogen from your microbes. So the byproduct of a lot of microbes is nitrogen. The breakdown of microbial bodies, when they actually break down and they repopulate so quickly and they break down, you get your nitrogen there as well. So you have to have a real rocking and rolling microbial population to produce a gob of nitrogen so that you don't need to have any nitrogen boosts for heavy grasses and nitrogen needing crops, right? Because I have seen a lag with grasses that way. Okay. And so what I would say is the same way in those situations that you get a drug addict off a drug, you got to get some of your grasses, especially your perennial grasses, off their drug. Now, what I do on like annual grasses like corn, we'll supplement heavily with like fish. We'll supplement them with fish byproducts. We'll brew a bunch of compost tea, mix it all together, and be able to supply the nitrogen needs for those annual crops. But for the perennial crops, I don't have the perennial grasses. The best thing that I have, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers here, but the best thing I've seen in the last 11 years is to back off your N, but get your microbial population popping, because the N is heavy in salt. It'll mess up your electrical conductivity in your soil. It'll zap a lot of those microbes, but microbes are resilient. If you keep on brewing microbes and introducing them as you add those little bits of nitrogen, you'll be able to wean that chemical nitrogen off. And I would say in a season and a half, you're done. And then you're just 100% natural from then on out, because we can't afford these 30%, 40% drags. And I've seen that. I've literally seen that in my clients, not myself. I never saw that with me, but I've seen that with my clients. And so that's not okay. We got to be able to keep making money and doing our thing. And you can't certify it organic for 3 years anyway. So use your head. But if we're talking perennial forages like alfalfa, I'm going to tell you unequivocally, 100%, if you've been putting chemical fertilizer on and you're hard into it, immediately stop right now, and you're not going to get a yield drag. You're going to get a yield explosion. Okay? So I rented 1,000 acres in Pocatello, Idaho. This gentleman was a chemical dealer, very heavy into spraying, everything you can think of. Very, very heavy chemical applications of fertilizer and all these other inputs. And year one on this alfalfa ground, his proven yield was 4.8 ton across this whole farm for 12 years. I saw the yield records. Year one, 80% of the farm, we yielded 6.5 ton to the acre. And then 20% of the farm, we yielded 7.2 ton to the acre. The next year, we were getting 8.1 ton to the acre and 7 ton to the acre on everything else. And most of that was the irrigation methods and stuff, being able to get across faster with irrigation was the only difference in the lag in that one farm. But the treasure trove of tied up nutrients in that chemically farmed ground was so abundant. All my microbes had to do was break it open and the plants thrived. The bugs went away immediately. When I tell you immediately, I'm telling you immediately. The weeds went away because the weeds don't need to be there, because the microbial population is fixing the nutrient profile in the soil, or the soil profile in the ground, and able to make it so that there was no need for the weeds to even be there. Okay, so like I said, there's no specific checklist. There's no exact. I'm not like a chemical salesman that'll say, oh, you need 200 pounds, 1152 a year, you'll be fine. No, that's not true. What I do believe is true is if you change your thinking, you change your mindset and think, how do I make these microbial populations pop? And what's in the ground already? Like every single, what's the weather here? What's the soil type here? Like there's so many variables in agriculture. There's no one silver bullet. The one silver bullet is change your mindset, change the way you think. Because when I moved to that farm in Grace, I'm from Oregon. I grew up in Northeast Oregon, beautiful place. And when I moved to Idaho, not only did I not know the soil, but I didn't know the people, didn't know the weather, I didn't know anything. And so I basically was taught nature is just linear. It's just this linear deal. There's cause and there's effect. You see a bug, you got to spray it. See a weed, got to spray it. If you see rust in your wheat, you got to put fungicide on it. That's just what you do. But what I've come to realize is nature is not linear. Nature wants health, right? Nature's chasing health all the time. The nastier the ground that you can find, the nastier the weeds, the nastier the ground you can find, the nastier the bugs. It's because nature's chasing health using their paramedics the best way that they can. And that's exactly what bugs and weeds are, is nature's paramedics. So that's what I'd say to the guy that was heavy into the chemical stuff. And he's like, crap, I don't want a huge yield drag. Okay, so I'm going to have a way different conversation of the perennial grass grower than I am the corn grower. And I'm going to have a different conversation with him than I am the alfalfa guy. Okay, so again, man, there's a reason why when I was searching how I learned all the things I learned, I didn't find the one guy. And so what I want to do is I want to be the one guy that will help people at least think differently, because I don't know all the answers, but let's do this. Let's have it in our mind that nature is chasing health and that we need lots of microbial populations in the ground to fix the soil profile. And let's go walk on your ground and let's figure it out together. And I believe that is the silver bullet. Somebody without a profit incentive to sell you something, somebody that can just help you be able to figure this out for yourself, because every situation is different. How many of us have always said, oh, that's fine for him in Arkansas, but it won't work here. That's fine for him in the east side of the state because it won't work here. That farmers, we're very good at being victims of circumstance. I call hogwash on that. But that's what I would say to that gentleman, Jared.
Yeah, perfect answer. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate that, you don't have a product that you're pushing, that you're able to be neutral and be able to address it from that standpoint. Did you have a question, William? Go ahead and unmute if you do.
Yeah, Josh, so just for context real quick, I agreed with everything you said. It all made sense, and that's the same stuff I've been teaching for a while. So my question is, how do you feed the microbes super good without having a thick detritus on the soil surface? Because from my understanding and what has worked for me for decades is the exudates coming out of living plants are feeding microbes, and then the second food source would be that detritosphere of the dead organic matter that's on the soil that's rotting down. Most of what I do is like gardening, vegetables and stuff. So it's pretty easy for us to have 6 inches of compost on the ground, and it works great. I've always struggled with the idea of hay and how to help people know how to grow it, because every time you cut hay, you're raking everything up and you take that detritosphere away. So if you can talk to that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
100%. 100%. And thank you for bringing that up, because I had that struggle. I actually called Gabe Brown when I was starting to wake up about my chemical problem. And he actually said, leave your third cutting on the ground and just leave it there. And I just thought, you know what, the little profit margin that there is in Southeast Idaho because of the transportation basis is in that third cutting. I can't leave it on the ground and feed my family. And so that's 100% right. So I did a lot of soul searching, and what I figured out is most people aren't going to become Jeffersonian agrarians, move out of the city onto little farmsteads and become self-sufficient agriculturalists. That's probably not going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years. Okay. And so I thought, okay, that would be the ideal situation, because if everybody gardened like you do, if everybody had like this rockin' 3-acre garden that could support 4 families, problem solved, man. I'm out of the picture. I'll go do something else. But what I believe is that people are urban. They're going to stay urban for the foreseeable future. And with the infrastructure we have in place in the world, commercial and macro agricultural production is probably going to be needed for a while. Okay. And so that being said, I thought, okay, and I've bought lots of compost, lots of heavy compost, and spent lots of money on diesel to go put compost on my hay fields. And gosh dang, it was compacting my ground. And I was writing these checks, I got writer's cramp here for writing all these checks and everything. And I was crying myself to sleep at night because my bank account was shrinking like this, And so I thought there's got to be a way to be able to add something to this ground that won't break the bank, that will take the place of the compost and the natural material that's breaking down. So you know what I do? I leverage technology, and I use primarily my carbon stock is either molasses or sugar. But here's the interesting thing about molasses and sugar. It burns off pretty quick. And so it's got to be cheap. And so I've figured out a way to be able to introduce microbial populations to the ground via compost extract. It's not tea, it's extract. And I build the extract on site on the place of application. I just build it right there. And then we just make sure to add plenty of carbon. The easiest sources right now, I have a client with molasses, and I've used a lot of sugar in the past. And so what that does is that adds that carbon to be able to keep that micropopulation popping. And the microbial population is breaking down. Think of when the little microbe bodies break down and die. Like that becomes a compostable source right there in and of itself. And so if we can so we're doing an artificial thing. We're out here with big machines. We're going across land. Like this is a big artificial thing. We're using technology to try to maximize production and be able to feed as many people as we can and animals. Fair enough. Okay. So we just got to look reality in the face and say, how can we supplement this? And so that's what I've been doing. I've been using sugar. Now for my rotation crop, like my annual crops, you know what we do? You know what we do? Say what?
What do you do, Josh?
Oh, there we go. That's what I was waiting for. We put tubers in the ground. All right, big old juicy tubers that go way deep, and then we don't even mess with them. We just leave them alone. We just leave them there. There's a whole ton of biomass. There's a whole ton of nitrogen. There's a whole ton of a treasure trove of stuff that can just stay there. And so in those pictures that you guys saw where there's multi-species above and going wild, guess what's below? There's radishes and there's turnips and there's all these big, deep tap-rooted stuff that just stay there. And then we go in and plant on top of that. So the microbes have something to eat there as well. And so, man, I never plant one seed. I don't think that that's a smart idea. Nature abhors one seed. You guys know that. And so even with alfalfa, you just got to use your head. I plant a little teff grass, a little annual clover, some different things like that on top of tubers that were there from the year before. Then we'll use sugar to be able to pop those micro populations and get them rocking and rolling. So there's ways to use seeds, to use different plant species, and there's ways to use just straight up organic sugar from Italy and get this thing done. This is utilizing technology and making money. This is about making money, and doing it this way decrease my cost of production by 15%. Now, as soon as everything becomes certified organic on your farm, then you can start really playing ball, because then if hay prices, forage prices drop below the cost of production, which they seem to like to do once in a while, that organic buffer will be there for you to help you to weather those storms. But I think the one thing that we do have control over is minimizing those inputs, right? And so by putting 1 pound, 2 pounds of turnips in per acre when you have your rotation year, you can have, thousands and thousands of tons of underground biomass to be able to bridge your fertility gap there.
Perfect answer. Yeah, that is a huge question, and one thing that I have seen also, kind of again with that worn out hay ground, where it's just after they pull the hay crop off, you've got more bare ground than you do plants. So thank you for addressing that. Talk a little bit about water utilization. You mentioned that, and kind of what you're seeing. I mean, we live in the arid West. We're just coming out of an extreme drought. We have aquifers that are drying up throughout the United States. We continue to pump and pump and pump. And to me, the writing is on the wall that farming as it exists today will be obsolete if we continue down this course, for many reasons, but the water being one of those reasons. And so what have you seen to be able to mitigate the water needs on the properties that you've managed, Josh?
So if you have microbial populations, then you're going to have nutrient and mineral translocation. You're going to have a lot of movement. You're going to have a lot of activity. That's going to stimulate plant growth, right? So with plant growth comes soil stability. With soil stability becomes increases in organic matter. Increases in organic matter lend themselves to water holding characteristics, right? So for every 1% of organic matter, and it's a little bit of a disputed number, but for every 1% of organic matter increase in every soil acre, that acre has the ability to store, I'll say the low number, 20,000 gallons of additional water. And so if that statistic is accurate, I've actually seen it. So I do believe it. One thing we noticed, it was a complete byproduct when we went down this road and started to be able to farm 100% chemical free. A year or two in, we noticed that we did not have any water stress near as much as we did before. And kind of in the rearview mirror looking back, we realized that our water needs were 20% less than they had been the years before, 20% less. And that's I attribute that simply because we had heavy microbial populations doing their thing, trying to get deeper and deeper into the soil profile as we added oxygen, making sure that we took everything into account based on our harvest methods and different things, making sure there was air deeper in the soil profile so that those microbes could go deeper, put carbon deeper, and keep it there. And so that's what I've seen in the experience that I've had. We actually had irrigation needs go down 20%.
Yeah, and imagine that, multiply that over how many acres are being irrigated under center pivot. I mean, throughout the United States, and that's huge. That all of a sudden, changes the not only the demand, but wouldn't we at that point begin to see incorporating all these other principles, water infiltration, aquifers would then begin to heal and rise, and we're reversing that. So what does it take, Josh, to reach a critical mass to be able to get enough farmers that we actually can do enough good on the millions of acres that are being farmed here in our country, and then we can address the world? But from your philosophical standpoint, from what you've seen consulting on individual farms, what is that going to take to get to that point where we're actually stopping desertification? We are truly regenerative. We're quit depleting the soil. We're actually building soil organic matter year over year. We're infiltrating more water, using less chemicals.
There's only one answer, Jared. It's got to pay better.
Yeah.
It's honestly got to pay better. That's the only answer here, is that it has got to pay better. And the only reason that I jumped out and started doing this so heavily is because, oh my gosh, I just leased this farm that I was leasing a 5 ton to the acre farm, and now it's giving me 8.1 ton to the acre. What is going on here? And so if those tons are profitable tons, assuming that your cost of production is low enough, then you can actually make money. And so I was on the phone with a very big hay producer in Idaho and Nevada yesterday. And I said, hey, man, you got all this hay. Would you flip organic if you'd boost your yields and increase your quality and lower your inputs by 15%? And he kind of laughed. He's like, who wouldn't do that? All right. So that's simply it. All we got to do is make a little money. And here's the trouble. You guys ready for the trouble? Everybody buckle your seatbelts, because here it is. So there's literally very little money in what I'm talking about doing. Very, very little money on the input side. So we use some mined minerals. We use compost extract, which is basically free. 82 cents to the acre is what I figured out we spent this last application about 3 weeks ago. Some fish, some I already said mined minerals, maybe some sugar, some different seed varieties. It's not going to make, it's not a huge boon to anybody. There's not a huge marketing campaign markup here for everybody. And so that's how come it's so quiet. That's how come it's so quiet. And so I know these fertilizer salesmen, they got kids to feed, everything, and God bless them, hopefully everything works out for them. But what we need to show is that, hey, you can take control of your fertility and your crop management and do it all yourself and do it way cheaper and make way more money and not have to write those huge checks to the fertilizer dealers. And so if a guy can just change his thinking, get his mind around that, utilize these natural and abundant substances that we have at our disposal, you can start farming in a very, very economically beneficial way right away.
Yeah, that's good. How do we, the next question, and this is how do we help this message go viral? Because I think the dollars and cents does talk to the people.
100%, man. I mean, 100%. So let's assume something first, okay? Because this has to be part of the conversation. So for one, you guys, is doing something going to pay you more than doing nothing? Figure that out first. Because there's a lot of instances when doing nothing, honest to goodness, pays you more, because swathers are 140 grand. Tractors are 200 grand, semis are 200 grand. Everything's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? I mean, I know I've owned millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment, right? And so does doing something paying? And there's been years where doing nothing would have paid me way more. Lease it all to the potato guy and walk away. Okay. So first of all, we have to assume that doing something pays you more than doing nothing. Okay. Because I don't believe in writing a righteous cause into poverty. Because that always has an end. You're always going to burn out if you're starving to death. And so that needs to be number one. How we make it go viral is by basically telling people, hey, listen, you get all your advice. It's kind of like going to a car dealer and going to a Toyota dealer and saying, hey, tell me about driving Chevys. Tell me all about driving Chevys. What's the Toyota dealer going to tell you? But this is exactly what we as farmers do when we're curious about some other additive or some different way of doing things, because 99% of all our input, all our agronomy decisions come from the guy that's selling the stuff, right? That's where we get our information. And so for one, you have to care. Like, nobody's going to come and save you. This is on you. So I think the viral moment is take personal responsibility for your own deal. Either go on with this agriculture thing or stop. I think you need to be completely, fully committed, but you cannot be committed to a poverty mindset. Because then you're just a martyr and you're a victim, and that doesn't do anybody any good. You actually have to have profit incentives, because when you earn profit, that's proof that you've added value to another human being. Okay? And so profit is a righteous motive. You need to go at this thing with the intention of building a vehicle that will create you profit. And you also need to have goals. Number one, you need to have goals that get you to where you want to go. So often in this industry, I see people, well, we're always broke, and everything, but I love watching the sunset come up in the morning, and we're broke all the time, and I don't really know where we're going, and we'll just try to do it as long as we can. Well, and that might be okay, but just because you're on a really cool destination, it doesn't mean that pathway is not leading you to hell. And I've seen a lot of multi-generational family farms and ranches turn into hell as they break apart and viciously get sold off. And so I think, number one, I've had a lot of number ones, excuse me, but we really have to pay really close attention to number one, why are we doing this? What are we trying to accomplish here? Is this going to take us to our goal? And just because the journey's cool doesn't mean the destination is cool. We need both to be awesome. We need our journey. The journey's going to hurt always at times with agriculture, but the destination can be awesome. But for it to be awesome and us to accomplish our goals, we have to have a profit motive in mind. We have to have a heart and a mind and a soul of service to be able to go and serve our fellow man, providing him products and services that he will pay whatever we ask for, because it's doing his life so much good. Okay, now with that context, we move forward and we say, okay, we have a goal, we have a dream, the path is awesome, we have a way that it's sustainable, and we can eliminate a lot of diseases in America if everybody does this. I mean, how awesome of a message is that? But we have to be honest with ourselves. We can't just be in the same boat and be at the coffee shop saying, yeah, we're ranchers and we're going to be ranchers till we die. We're going to be farmers till we die just because we're farmers. There's no why in that. Your why, if you have a big enough why, you can figure out any how. And so I've chosen, because I want righteous management of commercial farm ground to be able to grow exponentially so that it touches as many acres on this planet as possible. And then the way we do this, we got to get our minds right first. Okay. And that's how I would approach it.
Thank you for going there. That's beautifully said. That is a message that needs to be shouted from the rooftops, Josh. And so there's a couple other questions we have here. And again, this is being recorded, but if you guys have questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can just raise your virtual hand and unmute. Lindsay is doing dryland alfalfa, doesn't irrigate. How do you apply these principles on dryland acres? And if you need more context, Lindsay can unmute and provide that.
Well, I deal with a lot of dry farm, and a lot of times I'll go back to the question, is doing nothing pay you more than doing something? And we'll just literally do the math. Okay, this is what it would cost to get a spray rig in here, and this is what it would cost to do this, and this is the prospective return if it rains X amount in this amount of time. And then I'll ask the person, are you comfortable with that risk? And they'll say either yes or no. And I'll say, okay, if it's no, I wouldn't do anything to this piece of ground. Doesn't make any sense. Why? Because then you're just gambling. But if in your heart of hearts, you're in Western Nebraska and it rains every other day, and you have real consistent ideas about your rainfall, and you know that if you get a living group of microbes that Mother Nature is going to take care of them rather than scorch them to death, then that's a great investment and it'll pay back dividends. We have 1,500 acres in eastern Wyoming right now that's dry farm alfalfa. And they've had a wet year. It's going nuts. And the guy decided to treat it. And so that's what we're doing. But you guys, it's not like a chemical answer. It's not like, boom, we push this button, we get this result immediately. Like you're raising microbes, like you're getting a herd going. You got to take care of them. And if there's no water for a week and a half, they're all going to die. You're going to lose money. Don't do it. And so we have to be practical about this thing. This can't be a, killing ourselves situation here. So absolutely works on dry farm. Absolutely. But not when it's too dry. Because think about it, these microbes, they need something to eat. They also need moisture. They also need something to breathe. And if your soil is baked and cracked on the top, how's the air going to get down in there? Maybe there's a way we can figure that out with some perennial grasses or something mixed into your alfalfa. There's ways. There's always ways, and we could have that conversation. But I do not believe in the pontification of so many people in this industry that just say, this is how you have to do it for sure. That's disingenuous in my opinion. Maybe it works for them, but there's too many variables, man. There's too many things that are question marks. And so, can it work? Yes. Will it always work? No.
I assume that would be similar to rangeland type situation, perennial grasses. Like, when your pounds per acre or stock days per acre is minimal at best, you can't afford to put out a lot. But at the same time, are there some strategic things that you could do coupled with proper grazing and rest that you see that could be cost effective in the right scenario?
For dryland, on a dryland scenario?
On more of a rangeland grazing situation, perennial.
Now we're talking about grazing.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, no, not really. So it's really, really hard to add inputs on really low margin per acre ground. Okay, so doing nothing a lot of times beats doing something on those type of situations, because we're doing this to be able to provide for other people and make profit. And so if we're going to serve other people and make profit, we got to make sure that the margin on our acres is above zero by a substantial amount. And so on these rangeland acres, how much per acre, it's a math problem. How much per acre are we willing to, or do we need to make on this rangeland acre? Okay, in our situation, that's this much, and then we just do the math. It would cost this much to use modern technology to come in and fix it and boost it and bump it. And after that being said, we have to account the risk of no rain or rain. And then we make our decision from there. So let's just pretend there is a margin on those acres. It does make sense to treat, in which case I would heavily lean on different plant species and introducing microbial populations with a shot of calcium, because calcium, especially really, really reactive calcium that's not tied up, will open up pore spaces in the ground and give those microbes a fighting chance to breathe and give them a little bit of structure for a place to live. And so if I was to do anything in a dryland situation, I would maybe feed some microbes, maybe introduce some microbes, and maybe use some calcium to open up the ground. Even ground that's heavy in calcium, it's usually always tied up calcium. If you look at calcium under a microscope, it has a lot of positive reactive areas on it that it can attract a lot of things. And so in a lot of situations, it's completely full of other stuff, right? I'm just trying to speak very, very simply here. Yeah. It's very full of other stuff. And so it's not reacting. It's not pulling stuff apart. It's not utilizing its electrical conductivity to be able to create pore spaces and create microbe apartments. So yeah, like cheap carbon inputs, maybe a little bit of calcium, and then compost tea doesn't cost any money. So yeah, compost tea. But you'd also have to take into account, how do you get it there? I like doing spray rigs. I don't like the idea of doing it with airplanes. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Is there a disadvantage? Well, one of them, I mean, if you're spraying 15 gallons an acre, you just can't cover very many acres with an airplane. Is there another disadvantage to a plane versus a ground rig?
Yeah, it's expensive. It's more money usually. Yeah, more money. And I don't love the idea of microbes with no continued air supply and food supply in an airplane. It makes me nervous.
Yeah.
And it's expensive.
Makes sense.
These are living beings we're talking about. This is the change in mindset I keep hitting on over and over and over. It's a change in the way you think. All we hear is elemental sulfur for this, or different boron levels here. We think all these little electrical and chemical changes we can make. Okay. And that's industry. That's all everybody talks about. Let's just, even though those are so essential, let's forget about them for a minute and think about the biological repercussions. Okay. How's this going to serve or detract from my biology? It's a way different way to think about it, but it's literally where the gold is. That's where this whole thing needs to at least start. That's the stepping stone. We could talk about micronutrient applications, whatever, fine tuning things that you might need for a specific crop, if it's low in molybdenum or boron or whatever, or too high in those things, we can talk about that later. But the elephant in the room is your microbes are dead.
Yeah.
Let's fix that first.
Are you doing, when you go and you consult on a farm or ranch, are you doing any baseline soil testing to be able to determine excesses and deficiencies, and what test do you use and what do you look at real briefly?
So I actually was doing a collaboration with a very well-known organic consulting group. And as soon as they asked me that question, I says, you know what? I mean, the Haney test is cool for biological activity and stuff, but I don't use these chemical tests religiously, because they'll show a level of they'll say plant available, but what does plant available mean? In what context? In what scenario is it plant available for what plant? There's too many questions in these soil tests. So what I honestly do, my soil test is digging in the soil, seeing what's there, and then seeing what's growing in it. Mother Nature doesn't need a soil test. You can go and you can look on the top of the ground and you can see what the soil's needing. So after doing this for thousands and thousands of hours, literally, I just walk on pieces of ground and I look at the plants that are growing there and I say, oh, this is a highly electrical area. This has a lot of metals. The ECs in this ground are burning these crops alive. Or I'll look at a piece of ground and say, man, well, salt is a metal, so that'll be an issue. Or you'll look at some other ground and you'll say, man, this is heavily compacted, because you'll see plants that grow with a 3,000 PSI taproot, and just different things like that. So honestly, we're not going to figure everything out all the time, you guys. This is such a complex process, such a complex system, and humans, they love getting complex. They love getting into the nitty-gritty details and trying to fix and curate every single detail. I've met farmers like that, and they drive me crazy. I love them, but they drive me crazy, because we're not going to get all the micro populations right. We're not going to get everything right. All we can do is be good stewards. And so what I focus on is, let's find the least common denominator. Let's take it down and be very, very simple about this thing. Do we have microbes? How deep are they in the soil profile? Do they have something to eat? Do they have a place to live? Do they have air to breathe? If you don't, that's where you got to start. And then Mother Nature figures it out from there. And then if you have weeds that start to grow, that'll tell you exactly what's wrong. But 99% of the time that I've seen in perennial systems, especially, they go away. They just go away. I took Jared here to a field of mine. This is a funny story. I'm going to hang crap on you, Jared. I took him to a field of mine, and we didn't know each other terribly well yet. And we pulled up to this field, and he said, I drove all this way from Nevada, and you're lying to me, Josh. I said, what do you mean? And he says, this is Roundup Ready hay, isn't it? This is Roundup Ready hay right here, Josh. I says, you think so? He says, I've seen Roundup Ready fields and non-Roundup Ready fields. Josh, this is a Roundup Ready field. And I says, Jared, what would you say if this field has never, ever tasted a chemical in its life, and this is a 7-year-old alfalfa stand with no weeds? And I think that's kind of when I converted him. But the point is that when healthy soil is healthy, nature's paramedics don't need to be there. You don't call a paramedic on a healthy kid. Same way you don't need weeds and you don't need bugs in a healthy stand of hay, of mixed forage, whatever you're growing.
Yeah. No, I remember visiting there and, just looking across fence line again from your neighbors and yours and seeing the visible difference in vitality, deepness of green, leaf size, and well, this has been awesome. Maybe one more question before we conclude. And you kind of skipped over some of the slides there of maybe some of your expensive learning experiences that you've had. Yeah. And I've been able to, from a couple 100 miles away, see you go through some very challenging, very, very challenging things, including live or die situations with your wife, both when your child was born, in an accident, you could have been gone when an airbag blew up and you lost your teeth. I mean, there's, I remember making the comment, do you ever feel like Job? And, but with all that, you smile. Sometimes you don't have all your teeth when you smile, but by golly, you're going to smile.
You guys want to see $100,000? Look at this right here.
I know you're looking pretty good there. How have you maintained that mindset to overcome some pretty severe trials that, might have killed somebody else or might have made them quit?
Well, I'll tell you what, Jared, so I have in my business cards for Living Soil Management, my company, I have a little saying at the bottom, and it says, I made mistakes for 15 years, so you don't have to. So I think it would be very, very snaky of me to be in this industry, to be in this business and say, hey, you guys need to come be just like me. I don't know what you guys are thinking. You need to jump on my boat. I've never had any problems, whatever. No, that's so dishonest, and anybody that's actually been a practitioner in production agriculture, they all have had their butts handed to them at one time or another. They all have. And so when I was on my learning journey, and I'm still on that journey, but when I was just kicking that off, and I'd go hear these speakers, these university professors and these people that, have 5 acres and a mobile home or whatever, and they're trying to tell the world how to do it. I just thought, no, man, you can know in a book what the book says, but you got to live through some hard stuff to actually feel what it feels like and truly help somebody. I mean, there's an old Indian proverb that says, unless you've walked 100 miles in somebody's moccasins, don't judge them, basically is what it says. And so I wanted to add some slides in there. Like, this has been a brutal journey. This isn't easy. People call me like the chemical salesman that I leased his farm. He kicked me off his farm. He kicked me off. That 1,000 acres, man, I healed that thing. He would literally say, this is the best this hay crop has ever looked in my lifetime, but you're raping my ground. That was literally a sentence that he said. And so, like, this is an easy process, whether it be dealing with people, wrecks, all sorts of different challenges. I've had my butt kicked really hard, but your question was, how do you keep smiling? How do you keep going? And I think that we don't have a choice. It is incumbent upon us to place a burden. Human beings are intended beasts of burden. And so if that is true, which I believe that it is, that it's incumbent upon us to be able to take that load upon us and be able to make it through hard things, to do hard things, and to aim towards them, because only then will we not only get better as people to be able to help others, but we'll also do what I wanted my alfalfa plants to do, and that was to fill the measure of their creation. And I think if we're trying to help our crops and our animals fill the measure of their creation, how big can these alfalfa leaves get? We don't, let's push them. Let's see how big they can get. Same with you and me. How big can we get? What's our potential, you guys? How good can our farms and ranches be? How many people can you serve? Is there a limit? Once you hit that limit, are you going to stop? That sounds awful selfish to me. So I love Napoleon Hill's quote, winners never quit and quitters never win. And that's how come I keep my smile on, because I want to see what that potential is in myself, in the stewardships that I have. And to me, that's a life worth living.
Amen, brother. Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to give Josh a virtual round of applause here. Just beautifully said and well done. Josh, when people listen to this, this is going, and who knows how many people are going to watch it on YouTube, listen to the podcast, but can you share the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in starting the process of working with you?
Yeah, so you can jump on LinkedIn, Living Soil Management on LinkedIn, and my email is adamshaycompany@gmail.com. Either one of those places you can find me. Our website is under construction right now, so we don't have that up and going yet, but I do have a active LinkedIn and our email. Again, Adams, my last name, ADAMS, haycompany@gmail.com.
Yep.
Be happy to visit with you.
Yeah, and certainly if you need that information, you can reach out to us as well. And so we appreciate Josh. We appreciate the example that you've set of being able to do something that literally a lot of people say can't be done. You know, you can't be a regenerative hay farmer. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
These are the type of caliber of speakers that we like to have on these webinars, ones who are pushing the envelope, who are doing it in a right way, who are not leading to dependence upon subsidies in any way, whether that's subsidizing your soil, subsidizing your business, subsidizing your health. And so that's really the mission of Ag Steward, is to help family farmers and ranchers be highly profitable, regenerate the land they steward, and transfer viable businesses to the next generation. Because it does us no good if, you know, we rape and pillage and there's nothing left to be able to transfer. That's the true measure of success, is, you know, one, does the next generation want it? And two, can it support them? Can it support multiple families? Can we increase upon what we have? And that's the essence of stewardship, the word that we love and the word that we live by. So if that is the message for you, if you are somewhere on that journey, whether you're just starting out, whether you are well down the road, whether you're generational or first generation, certainly reach out to us, reach out to individuals like Josh, like William, those who, whatever scale you're at, if it's your backyard or whether it's thousands of acres, we feel like we can help. And granted, yeah, we don't have all the answers, but we can certainly help you to learn from some of the hard lessons that we've made and the mistakes that we've made. And that's our goal. And you've probably seen, a lot of you've gotten text messages. We're kind of changing up our platform. If you want to stay plugged in, certainly you can do that. If you want to opt out, there's no offense there. If this is a message for you, we encourage you to stay plugged in and to be able to share it. So we do these twice a month, the second and fourth Thursdays at 4:00 Pacific. And these are the type of speakers we love to have on, to be able to stretch us, change our paradigms. And so we'll cut the recording here in just a minute. But I want to give Josh just kind of the concluding words, and we'll cut the recording. If anybody's on here who wants more of a drill down for just a couple minutes with Josh, you can stay on. But Josh, anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
I just think that let's as agriculturalists, we need to be thinking about serving our fellow man, right? And the more service that we provide, the more profit. If we do it right, the more profit we will make. And the better our families' lives will be in the future, the better our destinations will be. And figure it out, man. Let's figure it out together. We need to be people of service. The world needs people that take a burden on their shoulders and stretches themselves and works hard to become better. And if we honestly think, X is okay for me and then I'm fine, you're saying I a lot. That's sure selfish. Let's be unselfish, stretch ourselves, and be men and women of service, and be able to serve, help as much as we possibly can while we're here breathing. And I think that will help us not only be joyful, but happy in every situation. And it's an honor to be here with you. I'm grateful to visit with you, and hope one or two things I said might have helped.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again, Josh. We appreciate you. Appreciate those who've joined us live and those that are listening to the recording.